Now back to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Radio Show, which is presented to you by Power Planter Earth Augers, the official digging tool. To find the right size for your digging project, visit powerplanter.com. Now here are your hosts, Joey and Holly Baird.
Welcome back to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Radio Show. It's your questions, our answers to the top of the hour. We appreciate you hanging around for the program this week. We always do. We thank you for being with us each and every week. If you got a question, there's a couple of ways in which you can submit that, and that is through email, which is gardentalkradio@gmail.com. If you would rather talk to us, you can do that by calling us at 1-800-927 SHOW, 1-800-927-SHOW, whether we're on the air, on your radio, or it's 5:30 on a Friday evening. You can give us a ring and we will get your question answered. A number of questions came in. We'll see how many we can get through. Holly, here is a question for you. Holly is a multi-award winning Wisconsin State Fair canner. You got a question about canning? She's the one to talk to. I can cherries and they are all sealed, but I see little bubbles on top of some of the jars. Does this mean they will spoil? I boiled them for 25 minutes and left them to cool before I took the rings off. Please get back to me. I appreciate any information you can provide for me.
The bubbles are fine. That's just a natural process. A lot of fruit holds a lot of air. So, especially cherries, they have a lot of little air holes all over. So that's okay. The bubbles are fine as long as you can them correctly.
Well, also you don't want to just buy them this week and can them next week kind of procedure. Because as the fruit, once it's harvested, will basically begin to break down and begin to rot to a certain level.
Right. But you just want to make sure you're using a recipe that is safe and following the procedures, and you're fine. The air bubbles are a natural thing.
Real quickly, let's address, because people might be going, well, I've never taken the rings off my jar. I just let them sit on the shelf. Why, we talked about this last week, and if you want that, a couple of weeks ago when we talked about canning what you grow, why do we take the rings off the jar for storage?
You take the rings off the jar so that when you're storing them, say like you're storing them and the lid,
boom!
The lid, maybe there's some sort of reaction, whatever, in that jar. And I would rather have the lid pop off than that jar explode. Mm-hmm. Also, if there is reaction in that jar, I would not want that lid to reseal itself. So, I mean, we've gone through our storage and we've, jostled a jar and the lid comes off and it happens, especially, with certain things like just tomatoes. Those are acidic. Sometimes it happens, whatever. So if you take the ring off, you're going to have the safest storage method, and there's no reason to store them with the rings on, so you're fine.
All right, here's a question here. I live in Massachusetts, and I have rhubarb that has been good for many years, but now it has thin stalks. What could be causing this? What could be figured out the problem here, Holly?
It means that that rhubarb is not getting enough food. It's not getting enough nutrients.
Even though it's in the ground, these things can live, upwards of 2 decades. They got to be fed to a certain level. Obviously, whether it's fertilizer or a top dressing 2 to 4 inches of compost in the fall, and then reapply it in the spring.
You also need to divide your rhubarb.
Right.
So that's another thing, and some people they neglect to do this. So every about 3 to 4 years, you want to dig up and split the rhubarb roots, and you want to do this in early spring or later fall.
Right. As the plant, before it gets into its growing cycle or as it came out of it, do not fear you're not going to kill the plant. This thing is a tough sucker, and it does need to be divided if it's going to continue to grow successfully.
Okay, so we have another question.
All right.
Hi, Holly and Joey.
Hello.
I'm hoping you can help me. I cannot figure out why my tomato plants look like they're wilting. I have pepper and parsley plants in the same raised bed. They look fine. This is the same bed I had sunchokes last year. I'm thinking maybe I should dig one out, check out the roots. Do you have any idea?
Well, hold on now. Before we dig up roots on tomato plants that are wilted, though other plants in that bed may look fine, it may be a lack of water. Tomatoes are an incredible amount of water suckers. They just drink the water up. So you may be thinking, oh, I watered it and I watered it and I watered it some more. Okay, good enough. But there is a lot of soil that needs to be hydrated, especially on the hot days that we're having, the 85 to 90 to 100 degree days with relative humidity in that kind of range as well. A lot of moisture gets sucked out of the soil. So just because you've watered and you think you've watered well, you need to water at least 5 times more than what you think, or get an irrigation system like we have from DripWorks where it's on a timer and I can go anytime in the garden, put my hand down, that soil is damp, not sopping wet, but it's damp. So it's adequately moist for the plants to uptake whatever nutrients it needs to grow. And if you've watered correctly and saturated the soil, and then in 4 or 5 days, those plants have not changed at all, then we've got another issue. Then we've got another problem. We can start, diagnosing what could be the issue. But I think with just the temperatures, I just don't think there's enough water being given to the plants in order for them to grow successfully. All right, next question. Thank you for all your hard work on the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener radio show. My question is it bad or okay or good to use unfinished compost in my garden? We've ran out of space in our compost bin and our raised beds could use some additional soil for topping off. I've heard that it could take some nitrogen out of the soil, but it could also improve the worm life and therefore the worm castings. Does the answer change between halfway versus mostly to almost done compost material? Thank you again for your help. So here's the answer. You can add unfinished compost to your raised bed. Yes, it will suck some nitrogen, but not much out of the upper levels of it. However, like you indicated, it will increase the microbial life and the worm activity in that raised bed, because then worms are going to come up there and work on finishing out that compost, devouring it, and the microbial life will increase. So it's definitely okay for you to add unfinished compost. And when I say unfinished, I'm talking 60 to 70% completion. Now, you don't want to throw, banana peels and leaf lettuce scraps in the raised beds. You want this to be majority of broke down material, and it will work very well. If you're concerned, I wouldn't be too concerned about the nitrogen being used up, because it's going to balance back out. So it's not like it's going to suck all the nitrogen. Your plants are going to turn yellow and die because you're adding a little unfinished compost to the top. So definitely, if you have some unfinished compost, 50 to 70% completed, you can go ahead and use that to top off your raised beds, your containers. You're going to top dress your garden too. We got time for one more.
I planted 2 Wozniak cherry bushes in the spring in Pennsylvania. When it arrived, it was basically a root stock.
That's what they are.
Mm-hmm. They were growing nicely. I placed a fence around each plant. Unfortunately, something got into the cage and slopped off each stem in the middle of the stalk below the leaves. I placed a 5-foot wire fence 2 feet outside of the plants all the way around, so I know it wasn't deer. I'm sure it wasn't deer. My question is, will they grow back? Do you think it was like a chipmunk or a squirrel? Maybe something else? What do you think they are?
I think it might have been deer. Deer are very sneaky. They can push that fence in and eat, and then that fence will pop back out. Also, you want to have a perimeter, but if you have too much of a perimeter, the deer are going to jump in. I think it was deer. However, squirrels and chipmunks can get in there too and gnaw away at the ground level and can be detrimental. So a higher fence in the future would probably be a good thing. There are different applications of different types of items you can purchase. Really cheap one is chili powder. You can sprinkle around the base. That'll keep the squirrels and the chipmunks away because they'll get in their nostril. They won't like that. Also the deer. The plants will not come back if they've been mowed off like that. So unfortunately that's not going to be a revivable plant. But keep in mind that nature is very versatile when it comes to getting around protection in which you have placed in your garden or area, because if they're hungry enough, no matter how much of like a deer defeat that you put around the plants, if they're hungry enough and they're desperate enough, there's nothing in which you can do in order to prevent that. But that would be chipmunks, squirrels, and possibly deer, unless you have some evidence that show otherwise. That's what we would say, and they're not going to come back.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.